Welcome, and this is a little experiment. While I'm editing, I thought I would make a little screen recording. But I had a comment in my last video, and the commenter was saying that skin color was caused by light exposure. And another comment came in thereafter and said that color was caused by genetics, and I thought it was interesting. I'm not sure, but I would add a third option, and that would be not only color, but entire physical characteristics could be caused by temperament and environment. And I'm basing this on the Russian experiments that were done. Forgive me, I don't have everything in front of me right now. But what they did is an experiment with foxes. And they were raised and selectively bred for their temperament. And most foxes were aggressive towards humans, but occasionally there were some loving and sweet ones, and they would separate these loving foxes and breed those together. And again, generation after generation. And the peculiar thing that happened was that the foxes began to look like dogs. Very cute dogs, and the ears stopped perking up in a alert fight or flight position and became floppy, and the tails became curly along with the hair, and the snouts shorter, and the hair color completely different, beginning to look like domesticated dogs. All starting with the same genetic pool and really unrecognizable to a wild fox, the species in which they had come from. Completely based on environment and disposition. Entire physical characteristics changing. And this made me think about the reset, and how possibly, if a people were brought underground and there was no light available and the conditions were more strict and fearful, what would be the result of the people once they emerged? And really, I watched a video recently by a Plain Truth, and it was about tunnels. And these tunnels are just fascinating all throughout our realm. And he was showing a proposed tunnel, and perhaps already complete, I believe probably complete and from a past era. But regardless, a proposed tunnel from Russia to the northern American continent. And just mind-blowing that anybody would propose such a thing. But we see this, regardless, all over the place. Tunnels going under the ocean. And to me, this is just so ridiculous that it could only be pre-existing. When we see the wonders left from a prior civilization, things that we can't replicate, it only seems natural that these tunnels, and same with Europe, connecting, I believe, France and England, and just all over the place. In North America we have them too, and these surely are not being created by our people, who really are still primitive in our understanding as a whole. And just like the buildings of the past, and really entire cities, that were simply unearthed or unburied from the mud, including railways and roads, I believe it's no different with these underground railways found underneath all major cities and across oceans as well. And all we're doing is unearthing them. And actually pretty simple to repopulate after a reset with such infrastructure in place. And more importantly, pretty simple to weather any cataclysms with access to these underground networks. And something that we, the masses, are not privy to. However, I do believe that there are access points scattered all throughout, and many of them sealed off to some extent. I recently watched an urban explorer show a very anomalous, what seemed like an entry point in the middle of the Nevada desert. And just one example of what could be. And this also brings me back to the Hopi story. The Native Americans in northern Arizona. And one of their oldest stories are that during the last reset, which in their traditions depicts a great flood, they were brought underground by the ant people, and the ant people raised them, cared for them in this underworld city. And it was dark and there was no sunlight, and after the waters had receded, they were brought back up to the surface. And there's an entire people, young and old, who have this as their story of origin. Very similar to the way we have a story of Adam and Eve. And I think that the story actually goes further back than this underground realm. In fact, it does, because their story goes back 5 resets. And nothing unusual at all to these people. Even having stories of a people more ancient than their own, called the Anasazi, or it could be translated as the Ancient Ones, and much to be said for these stories. All of our stories. More importantly, the oldest ones. And should we fear a reset? I don't think so. It's no different than asking whether or not we should fear death. We should not hasten death in any way, but I don't think we should fear it. I've made a lot of experimental videos like this that I've never released. Sometimes I just forget about them, but this is my least favorite part of making videos. It's not so bad, it's kind of like meditative, the editing, and really it's kind of exciting too, because at this point I don't even know what I've said in this video, and I look forward to watching the replay. And really, I still have the thoughts of these baby incubators at the World's Fairs the more I looked at the pictures and the posters and the advertisements, it really seemed like they were selling these babies. Like perhaps this first generation was not able to reproduce, or perhaps they were not even human. And this first wave of awkward civilization was another race entirely, having a human-like experience and adopting real babies, manufactured babies. And why not? All I see when I look in the past is advanced everything. And I believe I once saw in a Flat Earth British episode, Martin was showing in Egypt what looked like fertility clinics. And he made a very compelling case. Perhaps that video was on his old channel. Maybe he can bring that back again. Very fascinating. But I think that's it. We'll see if this works out. And thanks so much for joining me. And do have a blessed day. Please like, comment, and subscribe.